What happens when an entire generation of citizens simply stops participating in their own civilization? In 2021, China watched millions of young people embrace lying flat, a deliberate rejection of ambition, career climbing, and consumption. They weren't protesting. They weren't rebelling. They were just opting out. Within months, the government banned all online discussion of it. Why? Because when citizens stop wanting to participate, the game is over. This isn't just happening in China. Across the West, record numbers are checking out. Quiet quitting, NEET rates climbing, birth rates collapsing. People aren't being forced out. They're walking away voluntarily. Oswald Spengler predicted this exact pattern over a century ago, not as a possibility, but as an inevitability. He saw civilizations as organisms that don't just die, they commit suicide. And the process always begins the same way, with ease, with exhaustion, with a population that simply stops caring. The question isn't whether this is happening. The question is, can you see it happening right now? Spengler rejected the idea that human progress moves in a straight line upward. That's wishful thinking, he argued. Instead, he saw something far more unsettling. Civilizations behave like biological organisms. They're born, they grow, they peak, and inevitably, they die. This wasn't pessimism. This was pattern recognition across thousands of years of human history. He identified distinct life stages. First comes the culture phase, the spring and summer of a civilization. This is when societies burst with creative energy. Art, philosophy, religion, everything feels alive with meaning. Think of Athens in the 5th century BCE, Socrates walking the Agora, the Parthenon under construction, playwrights like Sophocles staging tragedies that still resonate today. People build cathedrals, write epics, explore fundamental questions about existence. There's a shared sense of purpose, a collective soul driving everything forward. Then something shifts. The culture phase transitions into what Spengler called civilization, the autumn and winter period. The creative fire cools. Society stops asking why and starts asking how. Innovation becomes optimization. Exploration becomes administration. The focus turns outward. Military expansion, economic growth, technological advancement. Cities swell. Institutions grow massive. Everything becomes more complex, more organized, more hollow. This is where most people get confused. A civilization at its peak power is already dying from the inside. The Roman Empire commanded the known world, while Roman culture had already exhausted itself centuries earlier. By the time of the Caesars, Rome was no longer producing philosophy, it was importing Greek ideas. No longer creating architectural styles, it was perfecting engineering. No longer generating new religious movements, it was managing old ones. The buildings got bigger, but the soul got smaller. Here's Spengler's crucial insight. Cultural decline starts the moment a society stops generating original meaning and starts recycling old forms. In the culture phase, artists create from inner necessity. In the civilization phase, they imitate what came before. Museums replace workshops, critics replace creators. Everything becomes self-referential, nostalgic, ironic. Hollywood today produces endless remakes, reboots, and franchise sequels. We don't create new mythologies, we mine old intellectual property. Politics transforms from visionary leadership into bureaucratic management. The machinery grows elaborate as the spirit evaporates. And here's where human psychology enters. People adapt to prosperity. Hedonic adaptation is the psychological phenomenon where pleasure baselines constantly reset upward. What once felt like luxury becomes normal, then necessary, then barely noticed. Societies experiencing prolonged ease lose their tolerance for hardship, challenge, and growth. The muscles of resilience atrophy from disuse. Convenience addiction becomes civilizational suicide in slow motion. Spengler understood something profound. Buildings don't hold civilizations together. Shared meaning does. As he wrote in The Decline of the West, "A culture is born in the moment when a great soul awakens out of the proto-spirituality and dies when this soul has actualized the full sum of its possibilities. When that inner fire dies, everything else is just momentum. The symptoms are unmistakable. Citizens become cynical about the values they once held sacred. Ideals that previous generations died for become punchlines. Sincerity becomes embarrassing. Ironic detachment becomes the default mode of engagement with the world. This isn't just cultural shift. It's spiritual exhaustion. When a society stops believing its own story, that society has entered terminal decline regardless of how powerful it appears externally. Consider how many people today can articulate what their civilization actually stands for beyond consumption and individual rights. Ask someone what the West believes in and watch them struggle to name anything beyond tolerance and GDP growth. Spengler borrowed from Nietzsche here, pointing to the emergence of what he called last men, citizens who desire nothing beyond small pleasures and safe routines. These aren't evil people. They're exhausted people. People who've seen ambition lead to conflict, vision lead to disappointment, greatness lead to tragedy, so they choose differently. They choose security over growth, entertainment over engagement. They don't demand greatness from their leaders because they don't demand it from themselves. Mediocrity stops being something to overcome. It becomes something to celebrate. Just be yourself replaces become something greater. Risk-taking gets pathologized. Ambition gets diagnosed as toxic. The nail that sticks out doesn't get hammered down. It gets medicated. We've created entire therapeutic frameworks to help people accept their limitations rather than transcend them. There's a psychological concept called value dissonance, the tension between professed values and actual behavior. When individuals experience this, it creates anxiety. When entire societies experience it, civilization accelerates toward collapse. Spengler saw this clearly. "Optimism is cowardice," he wrote, calling out societies that mistake prosperity for progress. Modern societies claim to value community while designing for isolation. We have more friends online and fewer people we can call at 3 a.m. We fact-check politicians endlessly while trusting institutions less each year. This gap between stated values and lived reality creates a civilization of ambient bad faith. Nobody quite believes anymore, but everyone keeps performing belief. The show continues even after the audience has left the theater. Let's talk about the psychological trap that catches every late-stage civilization. Convenience addiction operates exactly like substance addiction. The brain habituates. What once brought satisfaction now brings normalcy. So we escalate. More streaming, more delivery, more stimulation. This creates populations psychologically oriented towards short-term gratification over long-term flourishing. Citizens begin thinking in election cycles rather than generations. Quarterly earnings rather than sustainable systems. Viral moments rather than lasting impact. But here's the trap. This very short-termism makes us feel increasingly powerless. This is where psychologist Martin Seligman's discovery of learned helplessness becomes terrifyingly relevant. When people repeatedly feel their actions don't matter in a vast system, they stop trying. Late-stage civilizations create exactly these conditions. The machinery becomes so vast, so layered with bureaucracy, special interests, and competing jurisdictions that individual input feels like screaming into a void. Think about the average citizen trying to influence climate policy, housing affordability, or education reform. The psychological energy required to maintain agency in a declining civilization exhausts people into passive compliance. So they trade autonomy for predictability. They accept dependence because independence feels overwhelming. And where does that frustrated energy go? It turns inward. Not toward building character, but crafting an image. You can't fix your city's homeless crisis, but you can optimize your Instagram aesthetic. civic energy gets redirected toward personal brand management. Social media didn't create this pattern. It's the predictable technological manifestation of a civilization in Spengler's decline phase. Citizens become curators of personas rather than builders of meaningful work. They collect followers rather than develop wisdom. They perform outrage rather than enact change. High emotional display paired with low actual agency. This is the psychological signature of civilizational decline. People feel intensely while accomplishing minimally. This learned helplessness doesn't just reshape our personal lives, it rewires everything. An exhausted, overstimulated populace doesn't have the bandwidth for complex policy, so what do they vote for? The emotional satisfaction of spectacle. Watch how leadership transforms. Competence becomes secondary to charisma because charisma is faster acting, more digestible content. This isn't because citizens are stupid. It's because depleted populations prefer emotional satisfaction over complex solutions. They want leaders who make them feel something, not leaders who implement boring, difficult, effective policies. Political campaigns become indistinguishable from entertainment. Here's the trap. The very mechanisms that feel like self-preservation, choosing ease, avoiding friction, outsourcing difficulty, are the same ones that guarantee our decay. It's a societal prisoner's dilemma, where every individual's rational choice for convenience leads to the collective's irrational collapse. And the economy monetizes this perfectly. A population seeking ease is a highly predictable consumer base. So, self-care becomes a product to buy, boundaries a reason to disengage, and sensitivity a justification for avoiding difficult conversations. The system isn't just allowing this, it's actively incentivizing it. The society isn't collapsing despite abundance. It's collapsing through abundance. We're not starving. We're dying of overconsumption. Not suppressed, suffocated by options. Not poor, bankrupted by convenience. And Spengler made a prediction that seems prophetic. Late-stage civilizations inevitably produce strongman leaders, not through military coups, but through democratic processes. Citizens literally vote for authoritarianism because they're psychologically overwhelmed. He called this phenomenon Caesarism, the return to concentrated personal power after centuries of distributed governance. The name comes from Julius Caesar, who Romans essentially begged to become dictator after decades of political chaos and institutional failure. Why does this happen? Cognitive overload. Modern citizens process more information daily than medieval villagers encountered in a lifetime. Complexity fatigue sets in. Decision paralysis becomes chronic. The psychological burden of freedom in a declining system becomes unbearable. So people look for simple narratives, strong leaders, clear enemies, easy answers. They trade complexity for certainty, even when that certainty is false. The exhausted mind craves authoritative simplicity over messy reality. This is how democracies end, not with revolutions, but with relief. Political campaigns become entertainment. Sound bites replace speeches. Image consultants replace advisors. Everything optimizes for attention because attention is the only currency that matters in an economy of distraction, and whoever controls the money controls the attention. Can civilizations avoid this fate? Spengler believed the answer was yes, absolutely without exception. They cannot. Every civilization follows the same arc because they're bound by the same organic laws. Spring becomes summer, becomes autumn, becomes winter. No exceptions. He surveyed Egyptian, classical, Indian, Chinese, and Western civilizations and found the pattern repeating. Culture exhausts itself into civilization. Meaning gives way to materialism. Creation yields to administration. The fire always dies. As he starkly put it, we are born into this time and must bravely follow the path to the destined end. There is no other way. Rome couldn't prevent its fall. Neither could countless empires before or after. Power, wealth, military might, None of it matters once the spiritual foundation cracks. The external structure can persist for centuries after the internal spirit dies, but the trajectory is set. From Spengler's view, we're asking questions that have no answers. You can't stop winter. You can only prepare for it. Now, a crucial caveat. This is not to say the individual is solely to blame. We are swimming in a system engineered to make decline feel like progress. The algorithms, the economies of attention, the architecture of our cities, they all incentivize the path of least resistance. To choose otherwise is not just a personal preference. It is an active rebellion against the current of the age. Spengler's prognosis for civilizations is terminal. But his diagnosis contains a hidden key. If the disease is spiritual exhaustion, then the remedy, however limited in its scope, must be spiritual renewal. He who does not realize that this outcome is obligatory and insusceptible of modification, Spengler wrote, that our choice is between willing this and willing nothing at all, goes down. You cannot reverse the winter for the entire forest, but you can cultivate a sheltered garden. You can't save the civilization, but you can undertake the only project ever truly within your control, the cultivation of self. This is the Stoic response to determinism, focusing not on what you can't control, the fate of the West, but on what you can, your character, your actions, your mind. Declining civilizations actually create rare opportunities. Clarity emerges when illusions fall away. Reinvention becomes possible when old forms break down. Values get tested and refined when ease disappears. If you're on a sinking ship, the ship's fate is sealed. But your fate isn't. Focus on what you control. Learn to swim, help others, build something that floats. The question becomes personal. If the civilization around you is dying, will you decay with it or outgrow it? Decline creates evolutionary pressure. Not everyone responds by evolving, but everyone gets the opportunity. Civilizations collapse themselves because people collapse themselves first, through millions of small choices toward ease over challenge. But renewal is also individual. One person at a time choosing discipline over convenience, meaning over distraction. As forms around us grow hollow, seeking substance becomes rebellion. The question isn't how to stop the winter, but what you'll plant in frozen ground and who you'll become when snow falls. Now here's what I need you to understand. This video isn't just information, it's a mirror. And most people will watch this, nod along, feel that uncomfortable recognition, and then do absolutely nothing. They'll scroll to the next video, proving Spengler's thesis in real time. The algorithm doesn't want you to think deeply. It wants you to consume quickly and move on. Every time you pause to actually process something challenging, to sit with an uncomfortable truth, you're committing a small act of resistance. So if this video made you think, genuinely think, not just feel smart for a moment, then prove you're not already one of Spengler's last men. Share it. Not because you liked it in that passive way we like everything now, but because ideas only survive when people actively choose to transmit them. Civilizations don't die from lack of truth. They die from lack of people willing to speak it. Comment below with one specific choice you're making today that runs counter to the current of decline. Not a grand gesture, a real decision. Because collective renewal begins with individual accountability, and accountability begins with declaration. The winter is here. The question is, what will you become within it? Don't just watch, act. That's how ideas survive the collapse, one person at a time deciding they matter.